Sarah Mitchell arrived at the Thunder Ridge motorcycle rally in her dusty pickup, wearing faded jeans and a simple gray t-shirt. The exclusive gathering drew the country's elite bikers, their chrome machines gleaming under the Montana Sunday. When she approached the crowd surrounding a dead custom Harley, Derek Stone and his crew erupted in laughter. This woman, with her plain appearance, couldn't possibly understand their world. Derek made his cruel wager, $100,000 if she could fix his prized bike, but she'd leave immediately when she failed. His friends joined the mockery, certain of her humiliation. They had no idea who they were challenging. What happened next would change everything they thought they knew about engines, respect, and the woman standing before them. Before I continue the story, please subscribe. I need to reach 1,000 subscribers so I can keep bringing you stories like this every day. It's just one click for you, but it means a lot to me. Thank you. The Thunder Ridge motorcycle rally stretched across a pristine valley in the Montana mountains, an invitation-only event that represented the pinnacle of motorcycle culture in America. Only the most elite riders received the coveted invitation, those who had proven themselves through years of dedication, skill, or in many cases, simply wealth. The event grounds sprawled across 20 acres of manicured grass, surrounded by towering pines and jagged peaks that scraped the brilliant blue sky. Rows upon rows of motorcycles lined the main thoroughfare, each one a masterpiece of engineering and design. Custom Harleys with paint jobs that cost more than luxury cars sat beside vintage Indians restored to museum quality. European superbikes worth six figures gleamed next to American classics that had been in families for generations. Collectively, the machines present represented millions of dollars in chrome, leather, and pure mechanical artistry. The air hummed with the low rumble of idling engines and the buzz of excited conversation. Riders milled about in their finest gear, designer leather jackets adorned with patches from exclusive clubs, custom boots that cost thousands, helmets that were works of art in themselves. This was a place where status mattered, where appearance counted, where the quality of your ride and the brand of your jacket spoke volumes before you ever opened your mouth. Into this world of luxury and exclusivity drove Sarah Mitchell's Ford pickup truck. The vehicle was at least 10 years old. Its blue paint faded and dusty from hours on mountain roads. It sputtered slightly as she pulled into an available parking spot near the edge of the grounds, the sound almost apologetic compared to the throaty purrs surrounding it. Sarah climbed out, her worn jeans bearing honest stains from actual work, not the fashionable distressing sold in boutiques. Her gray t-shirt had seen better days. The fabric soft from countless washings, the color no longer quite uniform. Her work boots were scuffed and practical, built for function rather than style. She'd pulled her light brown hair back into a simple ponytail, efficient and out of the way. No jewelry adorned her fingers or neck. No makeup enhanced her features. No designer logos proclaimed her worth. She looked like someone who had wandered into the wrong event. A stark contrast to everything Thunder Ridge represented. She took a deep breath, grabbed her tool bag from the truck bed, and walked toward the heart of the rally. Derek Stone stood at the center of attention, exactly where he preferred to be. At 6 feet 3 inches tall, with a build maintained through expensive gym memberships and personal trainers, he commanded space effortlessly. His custom leather vest fit perfectly across his broad shoulders, every patch sewn onto it, telling a story of exclusive rides and elite clubs. The Iron King's insignia dominated the back, a skull wreathed in chrome flames that marked him as the club's founder and president. Designer sunglasses concealed his eyes, the kind that cost more than most people's monthly rent. His beard was perfectly groomed, every hair in place, the kind of maintenance that required daily attention and premium products. Around him stood his crew, the inner circle of the Iron Kings. Marcus was the tall one, lanky but strong, his riding jacket adorned with silver studs. Tony, shorter and stockier, wore a custom helmet tucked under his arm like a trophy. Jake, the youngest of the group at 35, constantly adjusted his expensive gloves, nervous energy personified. All three wore gear that screamed money, leather and denim that had been carefully distressed by designers, boots that cost 4 figures, watches that could fund small businesses. They formed a circle around Derek's pride and joy. A custom Harley-Davidson that represented 2 years of work and $200,000 in investment. The bike was a masterpiece, its deep burgundy paint embedded with metal flake that caught the light like liquid fire. Chrome components had been machined to specifications so precise they could have been surgical instruments. The engine was a work of art, visible through custom cutaways, every bolt and wire perfectly placed. Or at least, it had been a masterpiece until 3 hours ago, when it died completely. Now it sat silent and lifeless, a monument to frustration. Derek had tried everything he knew, and his knowledge was considerable. He'd built bikes for 20 years, collected dozens, prided himself on understanding every system and component. Marcus had tried. Tony had tried. Even Jake, who usually just looked pretty on rides, had offered suggestions. 2 other mechanics at the rally had examined it and walked away, shaking their heads. The bike that had run flawlessly for 6 months now refused even to turn over. Derek's frustration simmered beneath his carefully maintained cool exterior. His reputation as both a collector and a mechanical expert now very publicly on the line. Sarah walked steadily toward the crowd, gathered around the dead motorcycle, her tool bag hanging comfortably from her shoulder. The bag itself was old but well maintained, its canvas exterior bearing the marks of years of use. She moved with quiet purpose, her stride neither hesitant nor aggressive, simply direct. Derek noticed her approach first, his attention drawn by the incongruity of her appearance in this gleaming world of chrome and leather. He turned slightly, catching Marcus's eye, and a smirk spread across his face. Marcus grinned back, nudging Tony, who looked up and immediately understood. Within seconds, all 4 men were watching her approach, their expressions ranging from amusement to outright contempt. Derek straightened to his full height, crossing his arms over his chest in a posture of casual dominance. He waited until she was close enough to hear him clearly, then spoke in a voice loud enough to carry to nearby onlookers. "Are you lost, sweetheart?" The word sweetheart dripped with condescension. Sweet on the surface but poisonous underneath. Sarah stopped a respectful distance from the group, her expression neutral and calm. She met Derek's hidden gaze despite his sunglasses, her voice steady and clear. "I heard you have a bike that won't start." For a moment, silence hung in the air, and then the laughter erupted. Marcus threw his head back, his guffaw harsh and mocking. Tony slapped his knee, nearly doubling over. Jake's laugh was higher-pitched, almost nervous, as though he was laughing because the others were. Derek's smile widened, revealing perfectly white teeth that had cost a fortune in cosmetic work. "You heard that, did you?" He looked her up and down slowly, deliberately, his gaze insulting in its thoroughness. He took in her faded jeans, her plain shirt, her practical boots. His lip curled slightly. "And what exactly do you think you're going to do about it?" Tony chimed in, still chuckling. "Lady, we've had actual mechanics look at this bike. What makes you think?" Derek held up one hand, silencing his friend. He wanted this moment for himself. He stepped closer to Sarah, using his height advantage, his voice dropping to a tone that mixed pity with mockery. "Let me explain something to you. This rally is for serious riders. Not for whatever you are." He gestured vaguely at her appearance. "This isn't a petting zoo. These aren't toys. This is a world you clearly don't understand." Sarah took a slow, steadying breath, her shoulders remaining relaxed, despite the hostility radiating from the men before her. She didn't flinch at Derek's proximity, didn't step back from his intimidation tactics, didn't allow even a flicker of anger to cross her face. Her voice remained level, professional, almost gentle in its steadiness. "May I look at the motorcycle?" Derek's eyebrows shot up above his sunglasses. He turned to his crew, his expression exaggerated disbelief playing to his audience. "She wants to look at the motorcycle." He turned back to Sarah, spreading his arms wide in a gesture of mock generosity. "Sure, why not? Let's all watch the lady pretend she knows what a carburetor is," Marcus snorted, adding his own commentary. "Next she'll be asking which end the gas goes in." Tony joined in, his voice carrying across the growing crowd. Better check if she knows the difference between a motorcycle and a bicycle first. Jake, emboldened by the others, added, maybe she's looking for the kickstand to hang her purse on. The laughter grew louder, harsher. The commotion had attracted attention from nearby groups, and people began drifting over to see what was happening. Within moments, a crowd of 20 or so had formed in a loose circle around Derek's dead Harley and the unfolding confrontation. Some wore expressions of curiosity, others amusement. A few looked vaguely uncomfortable but said nothing. Among those watching was Beth Carson, a woman in her mid-20s wearing the colors of the Desert Riders, a smaller club from Arizona. She stood at the edge of the crowd, her arms crossed tightly across her chest. Her jaw clenched. She'd experienced enough dismissive comments and casual sexism in her 3 years of riding to recognize it instantly. And watching this woman being publicly mocked made her stomach turn. But she was a junior member, barely established. And speaking up against someone like Derek Stone could mean social suicide in this community. Derek noticed his growing audience, and his performance intensified. He stepped back from the motorcycle with a theatrical flourish, gesturing toward it like a game show host revealing a prize. Please, be my guest. Examine away. Maybe you can fix what 3 actual mechanics couldn't. Maybe you've got some special magic touch. Sarah lowered herself to one knee beside the motorcycle, setting her tool bag gently on the ground beside her. Her movements were careful and respectful toward the machine, regardless of its owner's behavior. She leaned in slightly, her eyes scanning the visible components of the engine, tracing the lines of fuel systems and electrical connections. Derek immediately positioned himself above her, looming over her shoulder, his shadow falling across the bike. His voice dripped with false patience, the kind someone might use with a very young child. Do you even know what you're looking at? Sarah didn't respond, continuing her visual inspection. Derek took her silence as confirmation of his assumptions. Okay, let me help you out here. This big metal thing? That's called the engine. It's where the power comes from. Marcus laughed from behind him. Better start with the really basics, Derek. That round thing is a wheel. Tony chimed in, his voice syrupy with mock helpfulness. And see those little wires? Those are very technical. They're called cables. Very complicated stuff. Derek continued his lecture, pointing at various components with exaggerated slowness. Now, this part here is the fuel tank. That's where the gasoline goes. Gas makes the engine run. Are you following so far? Jake added. Maybe she needs to take notes. This is probably really advanced for her. The crowd had swelled to nearly 40 people now, drawn by the spectacle. Some chuckled at the ongoing mockery, entertained by Derek's performance. Others shifted uncomfortably, their expressions uncertain, but no one stepped forward to intervene. Beth's hands had curled into fists at her sides, her face flushed with second-hand embarrassment and anger. But she remained silent. Derek's confidence swelled with each laugh from the crowd, each nod of agreement from his peers. He was in his element, the center of attention, demonstrating his dominance over someone who didn't belong. And this? He tapped a component near Sarah's face. This is the air filter. It filters the air. Pretty self-explanatory, but I wouldn't want you to get confused. Sarah closed her eyes briefly, taking a deep, steadying breath through her nose. Her fingers remained steady, her posture professional. When she opened her eyes again, they were calm, focused entirely on the motorcycle before her. As though Derek's voice was nothing more than background noise she'd learned to filter out. Sarah rose to her feet in one smooth motion, brushing dust from her knee. She turned to face Derek directly, her voice clear and steady. I can fix this motorcycle. The words hung in the air for one heartbeat, two, and then Derek's laughter exploded from him, loud and harsh and utterly dismissive. You? Fix this bike? He bent forward slightly, hands on his knees, as though the very idea had physically weakened him with its absurdity. Oh, that's rich. That's really rich. Marcus whooped beside him, slapping Derek's shoulder. She's serious, she actually thinks. Tony cut him off, his jeering louder. This I gotta see. This is gonna be hilarious. Jake was practically bouncing on his heels with glee. The crowd's murmur grew louder, a mix of anticipation and incredulity rippling through the gathered riders. Derek straightened, wiping imaginary tears from beneath his sunglasses, his smile wide and cruel. An idea was forming. A perfect way to cement this moment, to teach this woman a lesson about knowing her place. "Tell you what!" he announced loudly, projecting his voice to ensure everyone present could hear him clearly. "Let's make this interesting." He paused for dramatic effect, letting the anticipation build. "I'll bet you $100,000 that you can fix my bike." The crowd gasped collectively, the sum shocking even in this gathering of wealthy enthusiasts. Derek continued, laying out his terms with the precision of someone supremely confident in the outcome. "You've got 1 hour, 60 minutes. You can't ask anyone for help, can't make phone calls, can't look anything up, just you and the bike. And when you fail, and you will fail, you leave immediately, and you never come back to Thunder Ridge, ever." Marcus stepped closer to Derek, his voice dropping to a whisper that wasn't quite quiet enough. "Derek, that's a lot of money. What if—" Derek cut him off with a sharp gesture, his voice carrying absolute certainty. "Don't worry. People like her don't belong here anyway. She'll be gone in 10 minutes. Probably give up in 5. He turned back to Sarah, his smile predatory. "So what do you say, sweetheart? Want to embarrass yourself for a chance at money you'll never see?" Sarah looked at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, in a voice that carried surprising strength despite its quietness, she spoke, "I accept your terms." Sarah walked back to her pickup truck without a word, her stride purposeful and unhurried. The crowd parted for her, some still chuckling, others watching with curiosity about what would happen next. Derek called after her, "Running away already? That was fast even for you." More laughter rippled through the onlookers. Sarah opened the truck bed and pulled out a large metal toolbox, the kind with multiple fold-out trays and compartments. As she carried it back toward the motorcycle, those closest to her could see that this was no ordinary amateur's collection. The tools inside were pristine, each one nestled in its designated spot in custom foam cutouts. Specialized diagnostic equipment sat beside precision wrenches and torque drivers. Everything was organized with meticulous care, the hallmarks of someone who used their tools regularly and treated them with respect. These were professional-grade instruments, expensive and well-maintained, gleaming despite their obvious use. It was the first subtle hint that perhaps Sarah Mitchell was not exactly what she appeared to be. She set the toolbox down beside the motorcycle and opened it fully, revealing 3 tiers of specialized equipment. Without hesitation, without consulting any manual or guide, she selected a diagnostic multimeter and began a systematic examination of the electrical system. Her movements were practiced, efficient. The work of someone who had done this thousands of times. Each connection was tested with precision, each reading noted mentally, her hands moving with the confidence that came from deep expertise. Derek and his crew had retrieved beers from a nearby cooler, settling in to watch the show. They stood in a loose group about 10 feet away, drinking and commenting, treating the situation like entertainment. "Look at her pretending to know what she's doing," Tony said, taking a swig. "She's probably just randomly touching things." Marcus nodded. "Give it 5 more minutes and she'll admit she can't figure it out." But not everyone in the crowd shared their certainty. A few of the more experienced riders had moved closer, watching Sarah's diagnostic process with growing interest. Beth had positioned herself where she could see clearly, and her trained eye recognized genuine skill when she saw it. The way Sarah moved, the systematic approach, the confident handling of professional equipment, none of it matched the narrative Derek was pushing. Derek checked his watch with theatrical precision, holding it up so everyone could see. 45 minutes left, sweetheart. Better hurry." Sarah moved through her diagnostic with methodical precision, each step building on the last in a logical progression that spoke to deep understanding of motorcycle systems. She tested the fuel pressure at the rail, her fingers adjusting the gauge with practiced ease. She traced the ignition system from the battery through every connection point, checking voltage drops and resistance values. She examined the fuel injectors individually, listening to their firing patterns with a specialized stethoscope designed specifically for engine diagnostics. Every movement was deliberate, purposeful. the actions of someone who understood not just what to check, but why each check mattered. The crowd had grown quieter, the initial jeering fading as people watched her work. Even those who had laughed loudest found themselves drawn into the focus of her process. Derek continued his commentary, but something had shifted in his tone, a slight edge creeping in beneath the mockery. She's just guessing, going through the motions. Anyone can hook up a meter and pretend. But Tony, who had been watching more closely than the others, frowned slightly. She actually seems to know what she's doing. His voice carried uncertainty, doubt about the narrative they'd been selling. Derek's response came sharp and fast, almost defensive. Don't be ridiculous. She's just going through the motions. There's no way she actually understands any of this. She probably watched a YouTube video or something. Marcus said nothing, but his expression had grown thoughtful, his beer forgotten in his hand. Sarah had moved to the fuel injection computer, connecting a specialized diagnostic scanner that linked directly to the bike's electronic control unit. Her fingers moved across the device's screen with the speed of familiarity, pulling up data streams and error codes. She studied the readouts for several long moments, her eyes narrowing slightly as patterns emerged. Then she disconnected the scanner and traced a specific wire harness with her fingertips, following it behind the engine casing where it disappeared from obvious view. She retrieved a different tool, something most of the onlookers didn't recognize, and tested a connection point that wasn't part of any standard diagnostic procedure. Her expression shifted subtly, confirmation settling across her features. The problem had revealed itself to her trained eye, a complex dual issue involving fuel injection, timing, calibration, and a hidden ground fault in the secondary electrical system. Derek checked his watch again, but this time his voice lacked some of its earlier confidence. 20 minutes left. Sarah selected a specific set of precision tools from her kit and began the actual repair work. Her hands moved with the kind of fluid confidence that came only from years of experience, disassembling components with an efficiency that bordered on artistry. She removed the fuel rail assembly first, her fingers knowing exactly which bolts to loosen in which sequence to prevent any damage. Each part was set aside carefully, organized in a specific pattern that would allow for quick reassembly. The crowd had grown remarkably quiet now, the earlier laughter and mockery fading into focused attention. Even those who had been most entertained by her humiliation found themselves drawn into watching her work. There was something mesmerizing about her movements, the way she handled each component with respect and certainty, the way she never hesitated or second-guessed herself. Beth had moved even closer, her eyes wide with recognition of genuine mastery. Derek shifted his weight from foot to foot, his beer now warm and forgotten in his hand. Beneath his sunglasses, his eyes tracked Sarah's every movement. His jaw was clenched tight enough that the muscles stood out against his perfectly groomed beard. He forced another laugh, but it sounded hollow even to his own ears. "Time's running out. You ready to admit you're in over your head?" Sarah didn't respond, didn't even glance in his direction. Her entire being was focused on the motorcycle before her, her hands already accessing the electrical system behind the engine casing where the ground fault had revealed itself to her diagnostic eye. She traced wires with her fingertips, located the compromised connection, and began the delicate process of repair with tools most mechanics wouldn't even own. Marcus leaned close to Derek, his voice dropping to an urgent whisper. "Derek, what if she actually—" Derek cut him off sharply, his voice harsh. "She won't." But the certainty that had filled those words an hour ago had evaporated, replaced by something that sounded uncomfortably like fear. Tony and Jake had stopped making jokes entirely, both men watching Sarah with expressions caught between disbelief and dawning realization. Derek checked his watch once more, his hand trembling almost imperceptibly. 10 minutes left. Sarah reassembled the final components with the same practiced precision she had shown throughout, her fingers tightening bolts to exact specifications without needing a torque wrench to verify. She reconnected the fuel rail, secured the electrical connections, and double-checked each point of her repair with swift efficiency. Then she pulled a clean cloth from her tool bag, wiped her hands carefully, and stood up in one fluid motion. She looked at Derek directly, her voice calm and clear. "Try it now." Derek's smirk returned, though it looked forced. painted on like a mask over growing anxiety. "This ought to be good." He handed his beer to Marcus and swung his leg over the custom Harley, settling into the seat with the casual ownership of someone who had ridden this machine hundreds of times. He inserted the key into the ignition, his hand pausing there for just a moment, and then he turned it. The engine roared to life. Not the hesitant cough of a machine barely functioning, not the struggling churn of something fighting its own systems, but a powerful, throaty roar that spoke of perfect combustion and flawless timing. The sound was glorious, deeper and smoother than it had been in months, every cylinder firing in perfect harmony. Derek's hand on the throttle seemed frozen, and then instinctively he twisted it, revving the engine. It responded instantly, the RPMs climbing smoothly without a single hesitation or misfire, purring like a massive mechanical cat, the sound of engineering perfection. The crowd erupted, gasps of shock mixed with exclamations of disbelief. Someone shouted, "No way!" Another voice called out, "She actually did it!" People turned to each other with wide eyes, sharing their astonishment, their earlier certainty shattered by the undeniable evidence of their own ears. Derek's face drained of all color beneath his tan, his skin going pale and waxy. He sat frozen on the bike, revving it again as though trying to prove to himself that this was real, that the engine truly was running better than it had in half a year. The motorcycle purred beneath him, flawless and powerful, mocking every assumption he had made. Sarah had already turned back to her toolbox, calmly and methodically, packing each tool back into its designated space, wiping down anything that needed cleaning, organizing everything with the same care she had shown throughout. Marcus, Tony, and Jake stood in stunned silence, their mouths slightly open, their earlier confidence completely evaporated. Marcus still held Derek's beer, but he seemed to have forgotten it was in his hand. Tony's eyes were fixed on the running motorcycle, his expression one of complete disbelief. Jake had gone pale, understanding perhaps before the others what this moment meant for Derek. For all of them. Beth stepped forward from the crowd, her voice filled with genuine admiration and curiosity. "That was incredible. How did you act?" Derek cut her off, his voice sharp and desperate, still trying to claw back some semblance of control over the situation. "Lucky guess. Anyone could have." Sarah's quiet voice interrupted him, calm and precise, each word dropping into the silence like a stone into still water. "It wasn't luck. Your fuel injector timing was off by 0.3 milliseconds, and you had a ground fault in your secondary ignition circuit caused by a compromised connection behind the engine casing where the harness routes through the frame." The technical precision of her statement hit the crowd like a physical force. The specificity, the casual way she described problems that would take most mechanics hours to diagnose. The fact that she had identified not one but two separate issues and corrected them both within an hour, it all pointed to something far beyond lucky guessing. An older biker near the back of the crowd, a man in his 60s with gray hair and the weathered look of someone who had spent 50 years around engines, suddenly straightened. His eyes widened with recognition. "Wait a minute." His voice carried authority, and the crowd turned toward him. That level of diagnostic precision, identifying fuel injection timing variance in milliseconds. There's only a handful of people in the world who could do that without specialized equipment, and she did it in under an hour. Other faces in the crowd began to shift, confusion giving way to the first glimmers of recognition. Someone near the front pulled out their phone, fingers moving quickly across the screen. A woman whispered to her companion. Did she say Mitchell? Sarah Mitchell? The name began to ripple through the crowd like a wave. Person to person. Realization spreading. The deep rumble of an approaching motorcycle cut through the murmuring crowd, a sound so distinctive that several experienced riders turned immediately toward it. The bike that rolled up was unlike anything else at the rally, a custom machine worth over $500,000, its design so unique that it had been featured in every major motorcycle publication in the world. The rider brought it to a smooth stop and swung off, removing his helmet to reveal a man in his 60s with silver hair and sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. James Mitchell, founder of Mitchell Custom Engines, a legend in the motorcycle world whose innovations had revolutionized high-performance engine design over 4 decades. His presence at Thunder Ridge was always anticipated, always celebrated. He scanned the crowd with a slight smile, then his eyes found Sarah. "There you are, Sarah. I've been looking all over for you." Derek's head snapped toward the older man, confusion flooding his features. Sarah? The pieces were there, but his mind refused to assemble them. James walked through the parting crowd with the ease of someone accustomed to respect, stopping beside Sarah and placing an affectionate hand on her shoulder. "My daughter." Also, the chief engineer of Mitchell Custom Engines. The crowd's collective gasp was audible, a sharp intake of breath from 40 people simultaneously. The woman in simple jeans and a faded t-shirt, the woman they had watched being mocked and dismissed, was Sarah Mitchell. The Sarah Mitchell, the genius behind the Mitchell Precision Fuel Injection System that was now used in 70% of all high-end custom motorcycles in North America. The engineer who held 14 patents in engine technology, whose innovations in combustion efficiency and electronic engine management had changed the industry. The woman who had been profiled in technical journals and industry magazines. Though she famously avoided photographs and preferred to let her work speak for itself. She had designed systems that mechanics around the world relied on daily, created solutions to problems that had stumped engineers for decades. Her name was spoken with reverence in garages and workshops from California to New York, from Europe to Japan. And Derek Stone had spent the last hour explaining to her what a carburetor was. James continued, his voice carrying easily across the now silent crowd, each word landing with devastating precision. "Sarah's the one who developed the Mitchell Precision System. You know, Derek, the one in your bike." The irony hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Derek had spent an hour mocking a woman who had literally designed the engine system that powered his prized motorcycle. The crowd's murmurs grew louder, a buzzing hive of shocked conversations and hurried explanations. Someone near the front had pulled up information on their phone, and the screen was quickly surrounded by curious onlookers. The person began reading aloud, their voice incredulous. Sarah Mitchell, Ph.D. in mechanical engineering from MIT, graduated top of her class. Chief engineer at Mitchell Custom Engines for 12 years. She's been featured in Cycle World, Motorcyclist Magazine, Bike Exif, and Iron and Air. Another voice chimed in. She's got articles in the Society of Automotive Engineers Journal. 14 patents. 14. A third person, scrolling frantically, added, "There's barely any photos of her. Says here she prefers to stay out of the spotlight, believes her work should speak for itself, not her image." The reality was crashing down on Derek like a collapsing building, each new piece of information another beam falling, crushing his arrogance beneath the weight of his catastrophic misjudgment. He sat frozen on the motorcycle, its perfect purr now a mocking reminder of his ignorance. His face had gone from pale to flushed, red creeping up his neck and into his cheeks. His hands gripped the handlebars so tightly his knuckles had gone white. Marcus had backed away several steps, his expression one of pure horror at what they had done, what they had said. Tony was shaking his head slowly, as though trying to deny reality itself. Jake had gone pale again, understanding that their reputations had just been destroyed by their own actions, witnessed by dozens of people who would spread this story across the entire motorcycle community within hours. Beth stood with her hand over her mouth, torn between satisfaction at seeing Derek taken down and secondhand embarrassment at the magnitude of his humiliation. The great Derek Stone had just spent an hour publicly mocking one of the most brilliant engineers in the motorcycle world. James turned his full attention to Derek, his expression no longer amused but cold and serious. "I believe you owe my daughter $100,000. Derek's mouth opened and closed, words failing him for the first time in the entire encounter. When he finally found his voice, it came out in stammers and half-formed protests. I didn't know. I mean, if I had known who she was." Sarah's voice cut through his excuses, firm and clear, carrying a strength that had been there all along but was now impossible to ignore. "That's exactly the point. You didn't know. You assumed." She stepped closer to Derek, not threatening, but direct, making sure he heard every word. You assumed I was lost because I arrived in an old truck. You assumed I was incompetent because I wore simple clothes. You assumed I didn't belong here because I'm a woman who doesn't dress like your idea of what a writer should look like." Her voice remained steady, but the truth of her words hit harder than any shout could have. "You judged me by my clothes, my gender, my appearance, never by my skill, never by my knowledge, never by what I could actually do." The crowd had gone completely silent now, the earlier amusement at Derek's comeuppance fading into something deeper, more uncomfortable. People shifted on their feet, some looking away, perhaps recognizing their own silence during the mockery, perhaps seeing reflections of their own assumptions and prejudices. This wasn't just about Derek anymore. It was about a culture that valued appearance over substance, that made snap judgments based on surfaces, that excluded people who didn't fit a narrow image of what belonged. Derek's professional reputation was crumbling in real time, the narrative of his expertise and authority dissolving like sand in water. Everyone present now knew that he had failed to diagnose a problem in his own motorcycle, had publicly mocked the very person who designed the systems he claimed to understand, had revealed himself to be superficial, cruel, and fundamentally ignorant. Word would spread, and spread fast. By tomorrow, everyone in the motorcycle community would know this story. A woman in her 50s pushed through the crowd, her expression severe and uncompromising. Patricia Vance, the founder and organizer of Thunder Ridge, wore her authority as naturally as she wore her well-worn leather jacket. She had been standing at the edge of the crowd for the last 15 minutes, watching everything unfold with growing displeasure. She stopped directly in front of Derek, her arms crossed, her stance radiating judgment. "Derek, your club's invitation to Thunder Ridge is revoked. Effective immediately." Derek's head whipped toward her, his eyes wide with panic. "Patricia! Wait! You can't!" "I made a mistake, but—" His protests fell on deaf ears. Patricia's voice was ice. "This rally is about respect, skill, and passion for motorcycles. You demonstrated none of those. What you did demonstrate was cruelty, arrogance, and a fundamental lack of the values we stand for here." She gestured toward Sarah. "You publicly humiliated someone based purely on appearance. You made a mockery of the community we've built here, and you did it loudly and proudly in front of witnesses." Derek opened his mouth to argue, but Patricia held up one hand, silencing him. "The decision is final. Iron Kings are no longer welcome at Thunder Ridge." Marcus stepped away from Derek, physically distancing himself, his face burning with shame. Tony followed suit, shaking his head. "We tried to tell you, man. We tried to tell you to stop." His voice carried accusation and anger. "But you had to keep going, had to make it into a show." Jake said nothing, but he too had moved away, leaving Derek isolated in the center of the crowd's judgment. Derek looked around desperately, seeking support or sympathy and finding none. His empire of respect had collapsed in the space of an hour. He turned back to Sarah, his face a mask of misery, and his voice came out hollow. I'll transfer the money. $100,000. You won it." The bet had to be paid. His humiliation was complete, witnessed and absolute. But Sarah surprised everyone gathered there. She held up her hand, her voice calm. Sarah held up her hand, stopping Derek mid-sentence. "I don't want your money, Derek." Confusion swept through the crowd like a wave, people exchanging glances, uncertain what they had just heard. Derek himself looked bewildered, as though he had misheard her. "You... what?" Sarah's voice remained calm but carried a new weight, a purpose that commanded attention. "I want something more valuable. I want you to learn." She paused, letting those words settle over the crowd before continuing. "Here's my proposal. Instead of $100,000, you will volunteer 100 hours at a youth motorcycle education program. You will mentor young people who want to learn about engines, about riding, about the culture we're all part of. And specifically, you will mentor young women who are interested in motorcycles but face the same dismissive attitudes you showed me today." The crowd murmured, the anger and judgment beginning to shift into something else, something that felt almost hopeful. Sarah continued, her gaze locked on Derek. You'll teach them with patience and respect. You'll judge them by their effort and their passion, not by their appearance or their gender. You'll help create the kind of community where skill and dedication matter more than fitting someone's narrow expectations. Derek stood there, still astride his perfectly running motorcycle, his face a mixture of shame, relief, and something that might have been the first glimmer of understanding. He had expected punishment, expected financial ruin, expected to be destroyed. Instead, he was being offered something harder. The chance to change, to grow, to become better than he had been, humbled and with no other choice. Recognizing the mercy being offered, he nodded slowly. Yes, I agree. 100 hours. I'll do it. Sarah's expression softened slightly, the first hint of warmth showing through her professional demeanor. I didn't come here for revenge, Derek. I came here hoping to enjoy motorcycles with people who love them as much as I do. I came here for the same reason everyone else did. Because this is a community I care about. Her words resonated through the crowd, reminding them all of what Thunder Ridge was supposed to be. The respect in the eyes of those watching her deepened, moved by her grace in victory, by her choice to educate rather than simply punish. Beth was the first to move, stepping forward from the crowd with determination. She approached Sarah directly, her voice earnest and hopeful. I watched you work. I've never seen anything like that. Would you be willing to teach me? I mean, if you have time, I'd love to learn from you. Sarah's face broke into a genuine smile, warm and encouraging. Of course, I'd be happy to. She pulled a business card from her back pocket, handing it to Beth. Email me. We'll set something up. Beth took the card with both hands, as though it were something precious, her eyes bright with gratitude. Other riders began to approach, a tentative line forming. An older man with a gray beard stepped forward first. His expression contrite. I should have said something. When he was mocking you, I should have stepped in. I'm sorry for my silence. A woman in her 40s added her voice. We all should have. That was wrong, and we let it happen. Sarah handled each interaction with grace, accepting apologies without making people grovel, acknowledging their regret while gently reminding them that silence in the face of injustice was its own choice. James stood slightly apart, watching his daughter with obvious pride radiating from his features, the way a father looks at a child who has exceeded every hope he ever held. Derek climbed off his motorcycle slowly, his movements heavy with the weight of understanding. The magnitude of his mistake was settling into his bones, not just the professional embarrassment, but the moral failure. The cruelty he had inflicted so casually, so publicly. He approached Sarah hesitantly, his earlier arrogance completely stripped away. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, genuine, stripped of all pretense. I'm sorry. I was wrong. About everything. Sarah looked at him for a long moment, measuring his sincerity, seeing perhaps the first real honesty he had shown all day. Her response was measured but kind, offering not absolution but a path forward. Then prove it. Not to me. To yourself. Derek nodded slowly, the words hitting home with more force than any punishment could have delivered. The rally continued around them, but the atmosphere had fundamentally changed, infused with something new. Something better than what had been there before. Over the following weeks, the story spread through the motorcycle community like wildfire. It traveled from Thunder Ridge to workshops in California, to riding clubs in Texas, to custom shops in New York. The tale of Derek Stone and Sarah Mitchell became legendary, told and retold in garages and at rallies, each retelling emphasizing the lesson at its core. Videos taken by spectators circulated on social media, reaching hundreds of thousands of views. The motorcycle world is smaller than people think, and everyone knew someone who had been there, or knew someone who knew someone. Derek Stone's name became synonymous with a cautionary tale about arrogance and assumptions. Derek began his volunteer work at the Riverside Youth Motorcycle Program with resentment simmering beneath a forced smile. The first week was torture, his ego screaming at the humiliation of being there, of admitting through his presence that he needed to learn basic human decency. But something unexpected happened in the second week. He met a 16-year-old girl named Maria who could diagnose a carburetor problem by sound alone. He met a 14-year-old boy named Josh who had memorized the specifications of every major motorcycle engine produced in the last 20 years. He met a 17-year-old named Alex who had rebuilt their first bike from salvaged parts and could explain the engineering choices with startling clarity. Gradually, reluctantly, Derek's perspective began to shift. He saw skill and passion in people he would have previously dismissed based on their age, their clothes, their background, their gender. He watched young women tackle complex mechanical problems with the same competence he had once believed belonged exclusively to men like himself. Each interaction chipped away at the walls of his assumptions, revealing how much talent he had been blind to, how much potential he had dismissed. Sarah continued her work at Mitchell Custom Engines, unfazed by her newfound fame in riding circles. She declined interview requests, turned down invitations to speak at industry events, remained true to her preference for staying out of the spotlight. She focused on what mattered to her: her designs, her engines, her true passion. In her workshop, surrounded by blueprints and prototypes, she continued pushing the boundaries of what motorcycle engines could achieve. 6 months after Thunder Ridge, Derek Stone had completed his required 100 hours at the Riverside Youth Motorcycle Program and continued showing up every Saturday morning without obligation. He had become a different person, fundamentally changed by the experience of teaching young people he might once have overlooked. He had begun advocating for inclusivity in motorcycle culture, writing articles for riding magazines about his experience, speaking at local clubs about the importance of judging riders by their skill rather than their appearance. His transformation was genuine, born from genuine understanding rather than performative guilt. He contacted Sarah through email, his message brief and humble, asking if she would be willing to meet with him. Sarah agreed, and they met at Revolution Cycles, a small bike shop in a modest neighborhood where Derek now volunteered regularly. The shop was nothing like the exclusive high-end establishments Derek had once frequented. It was a community space, walls covered with photos of local riders, workbenches cluttered with projects in various stages of completion. When Sarah arrived, Derek was helping a teenage girl named Casey adjust the timing on a vintage Honda. He looked up, excused himself politely, and walked over to greet her. "Thank you for coming," he said simply. He showed her around the program he had helped build and expand. Young riders of all backgrounds filled the space, learning, growing, pursuing their passion for motorcycles. Young women worked alongside young men, different ethnicities and economic backgrounds united by their shared love of engines and riding. A shy 12-year-old boy was getting encouragement from a confident 15-year-old girl. Everyone was judged solely by their dedication and their willingness to learn. Derek's voice carried quiet pride as he explained how the program had grown, but also genuine humility. "I lost so much by judging superficially," he said, watching the young riders. "I missed opportunities to learn from people, to connect with people, all because I was focused on the wrong things. I can't get that time back, but I can try to make sure these kids don't make the same mistakes." Sarah watched him, seeing the authenticity in his words and actions. She nodded slowly, her expression warm. "You've done good work here, Derek." It was a moment of genuine connection, mutual respect built on growth and understanding. 1 year later, Sarah Mitchell arrived at Thunder Ridge in the same dusty Ford pickup truck, wearing the same style of simple jeans and faded t-shirt that had marked her first visit. But this time, everything was different. As she climbed out of her truck, riders recognized her immediately. People approached with smiles and genuine warmth, greeting her with respect and admiration. Beth was there, now a confident mechanic who had spent months learning from Sarah. She introduced Sarah to other young women. She was now mentoring herself. The cycle of knowledge continuing forward. Derek Stone was there too, invited back conditionally after Patricia had reviewed his year of transformation. He stood near the entrance with a group of 5 young riders he had brought with him, teenagers of diverse backgrounds who wore modest clothes and carried tool bags that showed signs of real use. When he saw Sarah, he walked over with genuine warmth, not the forced bravado of their first meeting. "Sarah, I'd like you to meet some people. He introduced her to Maria, Josh, Casey, and 2 others, all young mechanics he had been mentoring throughout the year. Their eyes lit up when they realized who she was, and their questions flowed with authentic passion about engineering and design. The atmosphere at Thunder Ridge had shifted in subtle but meaningful ways. More riders in simple gear mixed with those in expensive leather. More women rode and wrenched alongside men. Conversations focused on skill and passion rather than status and appearance. Patricia approached Sarah and Derek, acknowledging the positive change with a nod. This is what Thunder Ridge should always have been. Sarah looked around the rally, reflecting on the journey from humiliation to vindication to education. The importance of looking beyond surfaces had never been clearer. True worth was never visible in appearance, clothing, or assumptions. The most valuable qualities, skill, passion, dedication, knowledge, kindness, all of these lay beneath the surface, invisible to those who judged only with their eyes. Have you ever judged someone based on how they looked, only to discover you were completely wrong? Have you remained silent when someone was being dismissed or mocked, when you could have spoken up? The story of Sarah and Derek reminds us that respect should be given freely, that assumptions are dangerous, and that second chances have power when met with genuine effort to change. Everyone you meet knows something you don't. Everyone deserves to be judged by their abilities, their character, and their passion, not by their appearance or their background. And everyone, even those who have made terrible mistakes, deserves the chance to learn and grow into better versions of themselves. That is the lesson Thunder Ridge learned. And it is a lesson worth carrying forward.